Over the last few months, I've been working on a lot of code bases that were vibe coded or had at least, AI generated code. And they all have something in common. Components with over 1,000 lines of React code and sometimes even 1,500 lines of code in those React components, single React components. And these components were doing, everything from fetching the data from the database, refreshing the UI, handling the animations, managing the state, everything crammed into one place. And this is becoming more and more common. People are so focused on shipping fast and vibe coding that they're not thinking through a feature before they implement. And when I open these code bases, I can see the architectural and messy problems immediately. But here's what gets me. The rise of AI-assisted programming has introduced a new paradigm that is both exciting and also sometimes concerning. That AI can sometimes accelerate development. And there's a growing gap between vibe coding and thoughtful engineering. The issues with AI coding that will compound over time, as the developers who are working with these AI agents, they lack the fundamental skills to evaluate the AI generated code because everyone is focusing on building fast. Nobody is talking about what happens next. And you also see these usual hype tweets and posts on AI tools that vibe coding a Bloomberg terminal for geopolitics, and the usual tweets like this guy literally explains how to build this with AI environments and how to build mobile apps with AI. And I'm not being anti-AI that don't use these tools, but there is programming going right now, and what to do to be their right side. And currently, the current AI developer workflow looks like this. The AI generates code, you hit tab, accept, it works. They ship it. But what does the developer really missed? You know, what does this? Where are the gaps in this workflow? The developer really didn't think through that the component that they're making, that they are trying to one shot with the AI, that should this component be one or three? What should be the migration strategy for the backend schema, and how to make things testable, and how to also make the code structured in a way that it is also scalable and not make a mess when the other developers are trying to scale the code base so that it can manage more users, that you leave everything to AI and you are only there to prompt it, and you're only there to write the prompt that is going to one shot a feature. And this that is making us go away from a thoughtful engineering and and switching to blind coding patterns. So what will make a software developer valuable today, even if we are using AI? So what does really makes a developer valuable? Because there is abundance of AI tools, these Cursor, Cloud Code, Gemini, Codex, they're pretty capable of doing complex tasks. And also the UI based tools that are also popular, they're saying the front end developers will be over by the 2026 ends. Lovable, Vercel, Cloud Artifacts. These are some of the very popular tools. But where is the bottleneck? So where is the the real bottleneck that is stopping these AI tools to completely replace the developers? That the reason is the AI coding agents doesn't know the coding standards your team follows, even if you are using those MD files. Also your existing architecture and how the new feature you're trying to implement fits into that cohesively without breaking three other things. And also the performance requirements for your team and the deployment environment, that is very crucial when you ship those features without bugs. There is one important thing that is the most crucial bottleneck currently, that AI rejects the current coding standards or the structures your code base currently uses. For example, your code base has more than 10,000, 15,000 lines of code, and you're following a certain architectural pattern. And when you try to add a new feature using those existing patterns, it will try to override them, as a lacks true understanding of your code base philosophy. But why does it, fails to understand the code base philosophy and the design patterns you're you have implemented, because it is trained on millions of different code bases with a different patterns. So it will choose the average, the generic solution that will work, but that will not align with your specific design choices, because it doesn't understand the depth of the decisions that you deliberately chosen, why this structure is in your code base. And to explain that, you will need to make a pretty, extensive .md file that requires understanding of the code base. And this one, two more problems, inconsistency when you're trying to use AI agents to code all of these features in one shot, and thousand codes problem. The same I was talking about, over time, AI will start using different patterns in your code base that it will be able to, make every other file use a very different architecture, as each file will have different design patterns and different API structure. So after coding for a few weeks, your code base will be inconsistent, it will be difficult to refactor, and it will require a lot of, effort to refactor all of it into one single architectural design patterns. And there will be a lot of problems in refactoring also with how to use it properly. As you know, we have discussed what are problems with AI agents. We're trying to one-shotting the features, but where does the problem lies and how to solve this problem, that the AI is not able to follow some strict guidelines. So what to do? Because there is this context window problem. As you know, there is a fixed space the AI can at a time understand and add all these things that you want it to understand at a certain point. So, for example, it can at one single time can understand two files. So if you try to add three or four more files, it will start to hallucinate and give very random and vague code to you, which does not fit the pattern you're trying to implement. And there are also some nuanced understanding of the code base, which will require extensive explanation. So what to do? Building engineering judgment. This is important, as as more and more your engineering judgment is sound, the more you will be able to frame the problem more clearly. And you also need to have a user understanding that what features you're trying to implement and what AI should avoid. And the quality judgment of the code, it will be generated by AI. And also the strategic thinking, that steps need to follow when you're trying to implement a feature and not trying to do all of those things in one single go. As you understand these things more and more effectively, the fundamental and the engineering judgment, you will start to use tools effectively, the cloud skills, MCP, GPT agents, and this specific new tool, Ralph Loop. The more you have sound understanding and the engineering judgment, you will be able to come up with new tools and even methods to use these AI agents outperform all other engineers that are avoiding AI like a plague. So what now? So learn fundamentals is very vague advice and sounds right, but what fundamentals in what order for web development? How deep? So it should be done in phases. For example, first of all, you need to build your foundation, the stuff that never changes. For example, how does the communication between backend and the front end works? What are cores? What is the authentication flow that happens? And let me, before giving you the list, that phase one is literally understanding how the web works, how the HTTP methods work, how the HTTP communication works between front end and back end. That's simple. And when you understand that phase, that first phase of the web basics, you will move to phase two. So you will need to understand these few topics. Oh, okay, it's moving. So these few topics that are JavaScript, these are core JavaScript patterns, and the concepts. How does closures work? How does the event loop works? How does async await works? What are promises, and debouncing, throttling? These are important concepts to understand, and not directly relying on these coding agents to help you understand. You need to also read the documentation, watch some tutorials, not tutorials, I mean the explanation videos. And then you can move to React and understand how components render, how to use the use state, and what are context, and what is server components, client components, as you are going to use Next.js instead of directly using React, as React does not offer some of the features the Next.js and even TimeStack start offers. So start from JavaScript and then move to React. And then the main part here is the backend fundamentals, the most crucial part. I think AI agents work most effectively when you're trying to implement some backend features. Then pretty basic features, not some complex code base bug you're trying to solve, but basic implementations. So as you would have understood how the web works in the phase one, you will need to understand what is HTTP in actual practice. What are HTTP methods? What is HTTP protocols? And how does API design works? And authentication, authorization, database. How does the relationship works? What are types of databases? These are all important, and you don't need to delve too deep into it and try to have a PhD in this. You have need to have some kind of overview understanding so that you can even ask AI agents that, okay, the authentication works this way, let's try this method. So in that way, you need to have an overview understanding of what these components are. You also need to understand caching, as when to use caching, when to avoid it, and when to not overdo the caching to avoid the cloud costs, and also understand rate limiting to avoid bot attack, and also how to do efficient file uploads and storage. So these topics are framework agnostic. You will not need to rely on any framework to understand these. You can understand them, and try to work with different languages, whatever you feel you have interest in. Even Golang or Node.js, you can try them. And then if you do all these three phases, you will have pretty solid understanding, more than 90% developers. And then comes the main part, the long game. So this isn't something you can complete in a month. You have to do it in phases. You should try to give 1 or 2 hours to lead code forces, or even try to build something through some tool with the AI that you're going to use personally. For example, you can build an application that will help you track these learning as a learning management system. And as more you understand these fundamentals and the build your engineering judgment, you will start to get more specific with your prompts with the AI as you're working. And after all that, if you are ready, if you feel ready, I mean, you should start with distributed systems. Understand congruency, networking fundamentals, and how does message queues work? What is load balancing? These are important concepts if you're trying to break into big tech, or even work in a very uh, core engineering startup. These are all important, and you will understand them if you understand all of the above stuff. Phase one, phase two, JavaScript, then backend fundamentals. You will understand these topics easily, or you will keep going back and forth if you start from directly here. Just try to, if you're just trying to prepare for an interview, I mean, it's fine. But the understanding of these topics in depth comes when you have these backend fundamentals already understood. And last, prompting will improve a lot the way you work with AI agents when you understand these fundamentals more deeply. And at the end, I'm gonna tell you what does this changes the way you're trying to understand these fundamentals and trying to build your engineering judgment. As you know, everyone is using AI tools, and in 2 to 5 years, 2 to 3 years, no one will question why are you using AI tool. So how will the developers or companies will be able to judge your code? What will make your code valuable? These points are important. When using AI tools, you should be able to have an understanding how will this generated code fits into your system's architecture. That will it be maintained by your team, or will it need refactoring again and again to be able to integrate properly? And it also should be able to scale and also degrades graceful when things fail. And it should also follow your company's design patterns. The code that you generate with AI should be able to solve real problems. And the main motive of AI coding is to act as an assistant, not a replacement for your, problem solving skills. At the end, I want to say that programming has changed. Let's just acknowledge that. Writing code, that the mechanical act of typing syntax is less important than it used to be. Understanding what to build with clear goals and methods and how to architect those systems is more important, as it doesn't matter, if the AI bubble pops, if it doesn't matter if the YC-backed companies, startups lose money, or if some CEO says something absurd on Twitter or X. The way we build software has changed, fundamentally. As these tools exist, you will start wondering, why are AI agents doing everything but not properly? They're doing everything but not at the level the production quality code can be judged. And I know some people want to resist this and ignore AI, that it's not up to the mark yet, but and stick to the old ways and hope it goes all away. But here's the thing, you can't control what's happening by refusing to participate. Skipping AI won't protect your career, it will just make you irrelevant faster. So, test these tools, not in a 5-minute demo, but try to build something useful with it. Find ways to multiply your output with AI. And if it doesn't click, try again within a few weeks. But this is crucial, build your fundamental understanding first, not to learn how the systems work together. Develop the judgment to recognize good code from the bad code, so that you understand how to build lasting and production grade software, and then use AI to implement those features, applications more fast than you ever could before. And this is how you survive, and not even survive, but you thrive in it. The goal isn't to compete with other developers who have experience, but the goal is to understand why do things fast and how to do it effectively. This will be the distinction between developers who work with AI and those just copy pasting without comprehension, because this is the future. AI agents with your engineering judgment is the future. And so let's get to work then.